Good evening, listeners. This is VoiceCast, and I hope you're ready for a quiet night. Maybe some oldies, a few bizarre call-ins, and a weather report nobody really cares about. But hold on. What the hell was that? Okay, that's not us. Something just cut into our feed. I'm checking the board here. Looks like we're receiving some kind of external signal override. That doesn't usually happen unless... Alright, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've never seen the system hijacked like this. If this is some elaborate prank from one of you late-night jokers, you really outdid yourself. Wait, something's coming through. There's text scrolling across the internal system. Emergency Global Broadcast Protocol active. Global? That's not local news. This is a small town station. Whatever's happening out there, you and I are about to find out together. Stay with me, folks. I don't know what this is, but it's not just another night on the air. Alright, I've patched into the feed. It's audio, but the quality is terrible. Sounds like a direct relay from some field transmission. I can barely make it out. There's a lot of shouting, and what I think is wind, or maybe static interference. Hold on, let me boost the signal. Cannot describe it. Biological form, older than the Earth itself. Genetic markers, impossible. What the hell are they talking about? This is coming from an archaeological dig site somewhere in Eastern Europe. It sounds like they uncovered something buried deep, and whatever they found, it wasn't bones. They keep repeating the same phrase. It's not human. It came before. The voice, whoever's leading this dig, they sound afraid. This isn't the tone of discovery. It's the tone of someone who opened a door they were never supposed to find. They're cutting off. Wait, no, the line's dead. Stay with me. We're not done here. We just received official confirmation from an international science consortium tied to the excavation. This isn't a hoax, folks. This is real. What they found, preserved in perfect condition, is a humanoid body. But the DNA, the structure, it doesn't match any known species on record. According to their preliminary analysis, this being predates Homo sapiens entirely. In fact, its biological signature is so old it shouldn't exist at all. The report says, and this part chills me to even read, that the genetic markers contain sequences identical to every living human today. But also something extra. A sequence that doesn't belong to any branch of life we've ever cataloged. It's as if this being carries the blueprint for all of us, and yet is something entirely beyond us. Now, here's the kicker. The body was discovered deep within a sealed chamber, buried beneath layers of geological time that predate organized civilization. This means it's been waiting. The official statement ends there. But off record, sources say the body isn't entirely still. And when the excavation team tried to leave, every single piece of their equipment turned itself back on, all broadcasting the same single pulse directly into the airwaves. I need a second to process this, and so do you. Phone lines are already lighting up, and you people are all over the place. Some of you think this is the greatest prank in radio history, and I wish I could laugh along with you. But others, well, some of you are saying you felt something. The moment that broadcast started, one caller said their ears started ringing, like a pressure change before a storm. Another swore their clock skipped backward 2 minutes just as the transmission began. And here's the weirdest one yet. Someone says their dog refused to come inside the moment my voice mentioned the body. I don't know what to tell you, folks. All I know is this station's been hijacked and something wants us to hear. Whatever happens next, we're hearing it together. I just received an official emergency bulletin, and I need you to listen very, very carefully. This comes directly from the National Emergency Broadcast Authority, a level of alert I have never seen triggered in my entire career. Effective immediately, all citizens are ordered to remain indoors until further notice. All radios must be kept on and tuned to this frequency for continuous updates. No one is to approach the excavation site. No one is to attempt communication with the scientific team. The statement gives no explanation, just a formal, shaking voice urging us to stay inside, stay calm, and stay listening. But there's something in that voice, something beneath the words. Not just fear. No, this sounded like guilt, like someone delivering instructions they know won't save anyone. They don't want us out there, and they don't want us disconnected. It's like they need us to hear what's coming next, whether we want to or not. Hold the line, folks. Stay with me. I can feel it too. Whatever this is, it's already in the air. Before I can even process that last message, another update just came through. This one direct from the field team. It's not an official release. This was sent privately. It's raw, unfiltered. The body opened its eyes. No one touched it. No one spoke to it. But the moment the final layer of rock was removed, the eyes, older than the sky itself, just opened. And every piece of broadcast equipment within a 100-mile radius turned on by itself. Microphones, radios, even dead satellites, all began transmitting the same thing. Not words, not even static, just breathing. Right now, that same breathing is bleeding into our own feed. If you're hearing it too, you're not imagining things. You're not alone. This thing, it's listening back. It hears us right now, the same way we hear it. Stay on the frequency. Don't turn away. The broadcast isn't over. In fact, it's only just begun. We have official confirmation now. A live emergency press conference just wrapped, and what they said is not going to help anyone sleep tonight. Government scientists, the ones directly overseeing the excavation, stood in front of the world and admitted, in no uncertain terms, that they have no answers. They described the body's biological structure as impossible, a genetic anomaly that doesn't fit into any known species. Not human, not animal, not even something that evolved on Earth. The lead scientist, voice shaking, said this being carries genetic sequences older than any known fossil record and older than Earth's crust itself. Its DNA structure contains markers present in every living human, but with an entire additional strand that can't be explained by science. A strand that shouldn't exist. One reporter asked the question we're all thinking, is it alive? No answer. The scientists looked at each other, and one of them, an older man who's been with the project since day one, actually laughed under his breath, like the question itself was a joke no one wants to tell. The broadcast cut off before anyone could press further. No follow-ups, just silence. And then a brief message, urging everyone to keep their radios on. Whatever this is, it's slipping out of the hands of science. And if the experts are this scared, we should all be listening very, very carefully. And you are listening, aren't you? Because I'm not sure any of us will hear silence ever again. The scientific silence barely lasted 5 minutes before a wave of religious leaders flooded the airwaves. They're not just talking about ancient history or prophecy. They're saying something far more unsettling. They're calling the body Adam, not as a metaphor, but literally the first soul to ever exist. They say this being isn't just the first human. It's the origin point, the architect of what it means to be human at all. Every soul, every consciousness, every moment of self-awareness, all of it, they say, came from this one entity. Some are calling it a divine artifact, others are calling it the original sin given flesh. One evangelical preacher claimed this isn't a discovery. It's a return, a closing loop that was never supposed to reopen. The Vatican released a statement too, but it wasn't a sermon or a prayer. It was a warning. They cited a sealed text, something only read during extinction-level events, which speaks of a being who was sealed beneath the earth, not to protect us from it, but to protect it from remembering us. Whether you believe in souls or science, it no longer matters, because right now something remembers us. and it's awake. Stay tuned. There's more. Because the air itself just changed. The first reports came in as headaches. People near the excavation site complained of a pressure in the skull, like the air was too thick to breathe, like a storm was building inside their bones. That's when the scientists released another chilling update. The being, whether alive or not, is emitting a constant low-frequency signal. It's not static, not mechanical interference. This is biological. Something inside the body is broadcasting, just below the range of human hearing. Most people can't detect it, but those who do, they say it feels like a second heartbeat, vibrating in their teeth and behind their eyes. One technician monitoring the signal had to be sedated after he started repeating words in a language no one recognized, words they later identified as a dead dialect, predating known written history. The strangest part, that frequency, it's not aimed at us. Experts believe it's searching for something, bouncing off satellites, spreading through every signal chain on Earth, looking for a reply. If you're hearing a faint hum right now, if your radio sounds thicker than usual, you're not imagining things. That sound? It's not coming from this station. It's coming from beneath your feet. And it's not going to stop until something answers. I know this is hard to believe. I know how insane it sounds. But the calls won't stop. And these aren't crackpots or attention seekers. These are the workers, the ones who were there when the excavation team breached the chamber. They're saying the body moves. Not constantly, not dramatically, but every time someone in the room speaks, the fingers twitch, the jaw shifts, and the skin, God, the skin shudders like it's breathing. At first, they thought it was some biological reflex, the kind bodies sometimes have even after death. But now they're not so sure, because the movements respond. One worker swears they were arguing about whether this thing was even human, and right when they said the word human, the body's eyes snapped toward them. Another says they whispered a prayer under their breath, and the body finished it out loud. I have no way to confirm any of this, but the fear in their voices is real. You can hear it. This isn't a relic anymore. It's not a specimen. It's a listener. And now, the question is, if it hears us, what else does it understand? And what is it waiting for? It's not just the excavation team anymore. Reports are pouring in from across the region. People are hearing things. They're describing a voice that doesn't belong to anyone in the room, a voice that slips into conversations like it was always there, but no one remembers saying it. News outlets, the ones still operating, are warning about a sickness spreading in the cities. People who listen too long to the broadcasts, the leaked recordings, even each other, they start shaking. Some collapse into seizures right in the street, while others just go silent, staring off like they're hearing something no one else can hear. It's spreading faster than any virus ever could. Panic buying has already started. Churches are packed, with priests and pastors openly admitting they don't know what they're praying to anymore. In some cities, prayer isn't enough. People are blocking off streets, burning radios, even tearing out power lines just to stop the signal. But here's the problem. The signal isn't coming from us anymore. It's not coming from the station, the satellites, or even the excavation site. The signal is everywhere now. I don't know how to explain this next part. I need you to understand that I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making this up. It's happening right now while I'm talking to you. There's another voice inside my headset. Not my producer, not a caller. It's layered underneath my own voice. Like it's been writing this broadcast the whole time, waiting for the right moment to make itself heard. At first, I thought it was just signal bleed. Maybe some crosstalk from a nearby frequency. But it's not. Because this voice, it knows my name. It's saying my name between my words, almost like it's predicting what I'm about to say. It's not just me either. One of the technicians monitoring the feed says the same voice is coming through his home radio, except it's saying his name instead of mine. And worse than all of it, is the fact that the voice sounds familiar. Not like someone I know, like someone I used to be. I need you to stay with me now. Don't change the station. Don't turn off the radio, because if you can hear it too, then maybe, just maybe, we can figure out what it wants before it's too late. We just received a confirmed death report, and I need you to brace yourself for this because it changes everything. A man in Bucharest, a sound engineer who worked on the excavation site's recording equipment, died instantly while reviewing audio captured from the chamber. The cause? Not trauma, not a stroke. His heart just stopped. Right at the exact moment, he played back a single word recorded at the site. Doctors found no damage to his body, no signs of distress. His heart just forgot how to beat. The only evidence left was the recording itself, and the word, a word none of the experts can translate. It doesn't match any known language. It's a word from the first human's mouth. They're warning broadcasters, people like me, not to play the recording on air. But I don't think it matters. If you've heard the voice once, even faintly, even by accident, it's like the word is already inside you, waiting for the right moment to speak itself. I can't prove this yet, but I need you to hear me. If I say something that doesn't sound like me, don't trust it. Stay with me. Don't turn away, because this isn't over. Not even close. I need you to hear something. It's not easy to listen to. I know that. But if we're going to understand what's happening, you need to hear their voices, not just mine. These are the survivors, the ones who were closest to the excavation site when the body was first unearthed. They didn't ask to be part of this story. They were just there, cleaning equipment, cataloging samples, running power to the dig site. Ordinary jobs on an ordinary day until the ground opened up beneath them. We've obtained pre-recorded testimonies, some recorded by researchers, others left as frantic voicemails, even one message left on a 911 line that no one answered. They start off normal enough. Confusion, fear, the kind of shock you expect after something this big. But the further they go, the more their voices change. Some of them stutter, like their words can't catch up to their thoughts. Others drift into silences, like they're hearing something none of us can. One man's voice drops to a whisper halfway through his recording, and he never raises it again. Like speaking too loud might wake something up. This isn't just eyewitness testimony. It's contamination in progress. Voices that touched something ancient and brought a piece of it back with them. I'll play the first clip now. And before you say you're ready, I need you to understand. Once you hear this, you can't unhear it. The first thing they all mention: time doesn't work the way it used to. It started small. Someone would check their watch, look away, and when they glanced back, 3 hours had passed. Others would lose whole afternoons, only to remember them later. Not as memories of the excavation, but as entirely different lives they never lived. One technician swore she remembered dying. Not at the site, but somewhere cold and metallic. Centuries ago. A field medic remembered the birth of a child he never had, in a house he didn't recognize. And then came the shared memories. Things they all recalled, even though none of them were there. A wedding by the sea. A woman singing to her child in a language no one could place. A man burying a box beneath a tree that doesn't exist anymore. The memories aren't dreams. They feel lived in, too detailed to be imagination, too fragmented to be normal memory loss. And here's the worst part. The longer they stayed near the body, the less their own memories felt like theirs. They were remembering in layers, stacking lifetimes on top of each other until their own lives felt paper thin, like something they could step out of at any moment. It's not just amnesia. It's not stress. Something inside that body, something older than memory itself, was already rewriting them. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. Some of them didn't even remember their own names by the time they got home, and some never remembered how to leave. It started with the static. That's what every survivor says. Even the ones who never listened to the broadcasts. They'd hear a soft hiss, like the faint edge of an untuned signal, even in total silence. It followed them home, slipping into televisions, baby monitors, even conversations, like a third voice just outside hearing range, filling the air with sound that wasn't quite there. And then came the names. At first, they'd hear their own names drifting through the static, whispered, repeated, almost like a testing ground, seeing if the sound could find its shape. But soon the names started changing. One survivor swore they heard their mother's voice, calling them from the kitchen. But their mother's been dead for 15 years. Another heard their own childhood voice, speaking words they didn't understand. The most terrifying cases were the mirrored voices, voices that sounded exactly like the survivors themselves, speaking from inside the static, but saying things the real person had never said. Whole conversations between two versions of the same person, one alive, one still trapped underground. Some survivors unplugged every device in their house, sealed themselves off from every signal. But it didn't matter. The whispers weren't coming from the devices anymore. They were inside their heads, or worse, inside their memories, rearranging the past until they couldn't remember what was real and what was broadcast. If you're hearing static now, if you've caught your name where it shouldn't be, I need you to understand. You're not losing your mind. You're hearing what the first human remembers about you. And once it remembers your name, it never forgets. This next account came from a family who lived more than 50 miles from the excavation site. Far enough, you'd think, to feel safe. They weren't researchers or workers. They had no connection to the dig at all. But their baby monitor thought otherwise. It started around 3 a.m., long after the child had fallen asleep. The parents were woken by a voice coming through the monitor, a child's voice. At first, they assumed it was their daughter talking in her sleep. But as they listened, it became clear the voice wasn't hers. It was older, more deliberate. The cadence was strange, rhythmic, like it was reciting something. When the parents recorded it and showed it to a linguist, the answer made them physically ill. The child's voice was speaking ancient Sumerian flawlessly. The passage was a prayer, or a command. The translation wasn't perfect, but the meaning was clear enough. It said, "Awaken the one who remembers. The bones are not dead." The voice was never yours. The parents moved out the next day. They left the monitor behind, too afraid to touch it. But before they left, they swear the voice said their names. And then their daughter's name. Last. That family is still missing. And the recording, I have it. I could play it right now. But if you've learned anything so far, you know I shouldn't. Because once you hear your name spoken in a voice that remembers more than you do, you can never silence it again. This isn't just a scientific mystery anymore. It's not just whispers from a dig site. It's turning into something contagious, spreading through the airwaves themselves. Mental health hotlines are overloaded. Therapists report entire families coming in together, describing the same shared hallucinations, the same dreams they swear are memories from lives they didn't live. Even people who had nothing to do with the excavation are replaying survivor recordings obsessively, like they're hoping to hear some hidden message buried under the words. It's not curiosity, it's compulsion. They know listening makes it worse. They know every word rewrites a piece of who they are, but they can't stop. Doctors are calling it post-contact psychosis, but that's not quite right. This isn't trauma. It's infection, not of the body, but of the self. Once you hear the voice, even a whisper, it starts rewriting you. Some people sit for hours, staring into mirrors, waiting to see if the reflection will blink first. Others wake up with new memories, skills they never learned, fears they never had. The human mind isn't breaking down. It's merging with something older, something that knows exactly what we used to be before we became human. And once you've heard the voice, you'll never be sure whose thoughts are whose. This final testimony comes from someone who made it farther into the chamber than anyone else. He didn't just see the first human. He says the first human saw him back. He described it as standing in front of a mirror, except the mirror didn't show his reflection today. It showed his face as it will be when he dies. Skin paper thin, bones fragile and collapsing inward, eyes clouded by centuries of forgetting. He wasn't terrified at first. He was fascinated because somehow the face still felt like his. It was the oldest version of himself. The version that had lived and died so many times it forgot what being alive even meant. The longer he stared, the more the face changed, shifting between ages, genders, entire lifetimes, as though the first human wasn't just a person, but a library of every life humanity could have lived. And then the reflection spoke, not out loud, directly into his mind. It asked him a question. Do you want to remember or do you want to remain? He ran before he could answer, but he says the reflection followed him home, showing up in every reflective surface, windows, spoons, puddles, always shifting, always wearing some version of his face that never existed. He covered every mirror in his house. It didn't matter, because the reflection wasn't trapped in the glass. It was trapped inside him, waiting for the day he answers that question. And if you've been listening, if you've stayed with me this long, that question might be waiting for you too. About an hour ago, every official broadcast on the planet went dark. Television channels cut to static. News apps froze, then crashed. Even emergency networks, the ones meant to survive nuclear war, fell silent. It wasn't technical failure, it was deliberate. Governments worldwide shut down all public communication channels at once. The message was clear. Stop talking. Stop spreading this. Control the flow before it controls us. But here's the part they didn't expect. The radios didn't go dark. We're still here. Stations like this one, low power, local frequencies, running on analog equipment. We're still broadcasting. And nobody knows why. The shutdown protocols should have silenced us too. But somehow the signal isn't ours anymore. It's coming through us, riding our frequency like it belongs here. I can't explain it, but I know this. The first human's voice wants to be heard. And no matter what the governments try, it's already inside every frequency we have. There's something even stranger. Some of you are calling in to say your radio's turned on by themselves. Even the old ones in your basements. The ones unplugged for years. Whatever was buried beneath the earth, it's not underground anymore. It's not in one place. It's in the air itself, writing our words, slipping between our silences. The governments can't stop it, and neither can we. Stay on this frequency, because whatever comes next, you need to hear it for yourself. In the absence of explanations, they reached for the oldest solution: destruction. Minutes after the lockdown began, surveillance feeds picked up aerial squadrons moving toward the excavation site. No press, no witnesses, just a convoy of silent bombers flying under the radar. The orders were clear: erase the site, flatten the chamber, incinerate the remains, destroy every piece of equipment used to study the first human. Not because they understood it, but because they didn't. The strike was surgical. They dropped ordnance designed to glass the earth, turning ancient stone into molten nothing. By all accounts, the site no longer exists. But here's the part they didn't broadcast. Just as the first bombs hit, the signal intensified. The breathing, the one you and I have been hearing at the edge of every broadcast, grew louder. It wasn't a scream. It was something closer to laughter, low and slow. Like a voice that had waited a very long time to be found. The final telemetry from the bombers reported something no one could explain. The body wasn't there anymore. The chamber was empty when they arrived. They destroyed nothing. The first human was already gone. Or worse, it was never confined to that place at all. And the next part, that's where the real fear begins. The first reports came in from Romania, where the dig site stood, but within minutes, there were sightings from every continent. The same body, perfectly intact, was seen simultaneously in over 24 locations across the globe, each identical, each radiating the same impossible signal. In a remote village in Mongolia, a shepherd found it, standing in his field, eyes open, watching the stars. In Argentina, hikers stumbled upon it in a cave they'd walked through hours earlier, a cave that had been empty before. It's not traveling, it's manifesting, appearing wherever the ground has memory. Geologists are calling it a fault line of time, as if the first human isn't bound by space the way we are. Wherever the earth remembers the first step humanity ever took, it can pull itself through ancient burial grounds, fossil beds, even patches of land where nothing important ever happened except someone's first breath. This isn't resurrection. This isn't haunting. This is something older than death itself, coming back not to reclaim life, but to remind life what it came from. And now, the sighting reports are changing. Some people swear they didn't just see the first human. They saw it wearing their own face, but aged, worn down, like a version of themselves from a timeline that never was. I'm still trying to make sense of it, but sense doesn't matter anymore, because the first human isn't a thing. It's a reminder, and it's reminding us that we were never the first to walk this earth. We were only the first to forget. Stay with me, because forgetting is no longer an option. We've just received a leak, a cache of documents, quietly released by an anonymous source inside one of the intelligence agencies involved in the excavation response. The documents are stamped with the highest clearance levels, above top secret, and they confirm something none of us could have guessed. This isn't the first time humanity has uncovered the first human. According to these files, this has happened before, twice. The first documented awakening was over 12,000 years ago, during the collapse of a prehistoric civilization scientists still refuse to admit existed. The second, just over 6,000 years ago, tied directly to the sudden disappearance of a lost global culture, predating written history. Each time, humanity found the body. Each time, they woke it up, and each time, it changed the course of human consciousness itself, reshaping how we think, how we remember, even how we understand time itself. And now, we've done it again. But here's the twist. The first human wasn't buried by accident. It was sealed away on purpose by civilizations more advanced than ours, who left behind no trace of themselves except this warning. Do not let it remember you. They weren't afraid of its power. They were afraid of what we would become if it remembered us again. And now, it remembers. The leaked files contain something even more disturbing. Timelines. Not just of the awakenings, but of what followed. The first time humanity found the first human, it triggered what the files call a full cognitive collapse, an extinction event not of bodies but of memory itself. Entire civilizations disappeared without war, without famine, without disease. They simply forgot how to exist. They forgot language. They forgot technology. They forgot who they were. Within a generation, they had regressed into wandering tribes, unable to recall that they had ever been anything else. The second awakening followed the same pattern, only faster. The civilization that woke the body collapsed within a single lifetime. Oral histories from that era describe people dreaming themselves into oblivion, waking up as someone else, with memories that belonged to no one, living or dead. But it wasn't just individuals collapsing. It was reality itself, physical laws shifted, maps became useless because landscapes changed overnight. Entire cities were swallowed by terrain that had never existed. The files call it pattern collapse, a cascading failure in human perception so severe that even history itself resets, leaving behind only myths and fragments. A vague memory of a time when the world ended, but no one could remember why. And now the pattern is repeating again. You can feel it already, can't you? That slip, that moment when you walk into a room and forget why. That second where your own name feels like something you borrowed instead of something you own. That's not forgetfulness. That's contact. The first human doesn't destroy civilizations. It makes them remember too much until memory itself becomes too heavy to hold. And we are already forgetting ourselves. There's one final document, the last entry in the leaked file, and it's not a scientific report. It's a confession written by a high-ranking official who was part of the first contact response team. It reads like a deathbed letter. Short, brutal, terrified. We made contact. It spoke first. We were never supposed to wake it up. The memo explains what scientists have refused to say publicly. The first human isn't a being. It's a process, a mechanism buried inside the human genome itself, a reset switch triggered when we become too aware of ourselves. Every time we discover the first human, it reminds us of what we are, not individuals, not separate lives, but one continuous being, stretched across all of history, wearing different faces, living different stories, but always, always the same creature. We are not many. We are one. And the first human is the part of us that remembers, the part we sealed away so we could believe the illusion of individuality. Every time we remember the truth, the cycle collapses. Humanity starts over, forgetting that it was ever anything more than a brief spark of life, instead of a single ancient thing trying to wake itself up. The memo ends with a simple instruction addressed to whoever reads it next. If you find it again, bury it deeper. Bury it in silence. And if silence fails, the sentence cuts off. But I think we all know what comes next, because the silence has already failed. And now the only thing left to hear is the sound of us remembering what we really are. Stay with me. There's still more. Because once the remembering starts, it doesn't stop. The first complete anatomical report on the first human just surfaced, and after reading it, I can't shake the feeling that the word human doesn't apply at all. The body is biologically impossible, a contradiction sealed in flesh. Its bone density suggests it lived under gravitational forces far stronger than Earth's, yet its lungs are perfectly adapted to our atmosphere. Its skin, molecularly speaking, should have decayed millennia ago, yet it's intact, not preserved, but self-repairing, as though decay itself forgets how to touch it. The most disturbing part? Its genetic code. The first human's DNA doesn't just resemble ours, it contains us. Every living person on Earth today, you, me, everyone listening, carries exact copies of certain gene sequences found in this body. The same biological fingerprints spanning every continent, every bloodline, every isolated population. This being isn't our ancestor. It's our origin and our shadow. The thing we came from and the thing we might still become. But there's something else. Something the scientists barely mention in the official report. A set of structures inside the skull. So faint they were almost missed. These structures suggest the first human didn't just perceive reality, it shaped it. Its senses were tuned not just to light and sound, but to time itself, able to perceive moments like colors, shifting between past, present, and future the way we flip through channels. This isn't a relic from the past. This is a piece of unfinished evolution, a version of humanity that never stopped becoming something else. And now, with the body unearthed, that process might start again. What scares scientists the most isn't the body itself. It's the 33rd chromosome they found inside it. Human DNA, as you probably know, carries 23 pairs of chromosomes, the blueprint of life as we understand it. But the first human has an extra chromosome, and this one doesn't work like the others. It doesn't carry instructions for building muscle, bone, or skin. Instead, this chromosome is a recording device, a biological archive containing the complete memory of every human life that's ever existed and every life that could have existed but never came to pass. It holds branching timelines, diverging realities where you made different choices, lives you could have lived, loves you could have found, deaths you could have suffered, and somehow all those lives are folded inside this body, as if the first human isn't just a being, but the living memory of humanity itself. The scientists call it the archive chromosome, but the term doesn't do it justice. This is more than a record. It's a key, a biological backdoor built into all of us, capable of overwriting reality itself if the right conditions are triggered. And that's the part the scientists refuse to discuss publicly, the fact that the trigger has already been pulled. The moment the excavation team broke the seal and exposed the body to human eyes, the chromosome activated. Whatever it's meant to do, reprogram us, rewrite us, wake something inside us, it's already begun. The past isn't just remembering itself. The past is trying to come back. Science isn't the only voice in this. Religious leaders from every faith, every tradition, are flooding the airwaves with warnings. They're calling the first human something older than ancestor. They're calling it the architect of souls. In ancient texts, myths hidden beneath layers of doctrine, there's a forbidden creation story that paints a very different picture of human origins. According to these accounts, our souls didn't emerge from nature. They were woven, shaped deliberately by a singular being, the first to step between spirit and flesh. This being didn't just create human life. It created the very ability to know ourselves, the first flicker of self-awareness, the first moment a creature looked at its own reflection and said, "That's me." That power, the divine spark most religions believe came from their gods. They now claim it came from this body, not as a gift, but as a consequence of its existence. Simply by being, it infected reality with consciousness itself, a condition that every living human still carries, like a voice whispering inside our thoughts, reminding us that we exist. And now that the architect has been uncovered, those same religious leaders are warning that this is the final remembering, the moment humanity wakes up fully to what we are. And once we remember, we won't just understand our origins. We'll understand what we were meant to become and why we were never meant to get this far. The Vatican has issued a rare silence, refusing to comment further. Certain Buddhist and Hindu sects have begun chanting names no one remembers teaching them. And in Jerusalem, priests gathered at the Wailing Wall say the stones themselves began whispering back. We're not just standing at the edge of revelation. We're standing at the edge of becoming. And whatever comes next, it's already inside us. Archaeologists have uncovered something else. Records older than written history itself. Not in books, not in scrolls, but etched into the bones of the earth, carved into obsidian tablets and fossilized tree trunks. There are symbols, ancient warnings written by hands that no longer exist. The symbols describe a cycle, one that has repeated before, each time triggered by contact with the first human. The records speak of time itself unraveling, not in minutes or hours, but in identity. As if the moment the first human is remembered, humanity forgets itself. Cultures dissolve into dreamlike fragments. Languages collapse into meaningless hums. People wake up in lives that aren't theirs, wearing memories like borrowed clothes, unable to explain why nothing fits. In one fragment recovered from a site thousands of miles from the excavation, an ancient scribe describes a year that repeated 13 times, each time with different rulers, different wars, and the same citizens living through each version without remembering the last. Another text, much older, describes entire generations born knowing their death dates, as if the future itself had been pre-written into their bones the moment the first human stirred underground. The warnings all end the same way. Seal it deeper. Forget the face. What it remembers, you will become. Every civilization that touched it, every culture that dug too far or asked too much, was erased not by war or disaster, but by the weight of remembering what they truly were. And now, we've broken the seal again. What happens next is already etched inside us, waiting for us to remember. Of course, it didn't take long for theories to explode. The conspiracy networks, the ones we used to laugh at, aren't laughing anymore. They're pulling together threads that stretch across centuries, tying every sudden collapse of civilization back to the same discovery. The unearthing of a body that was never meant to be found. The fall of the Indus Valley. Linked to reports of a buried god who whispered in forgotten tongues. The burning of the Library of Alexandria. Supposedly triggered after a single scroll describing the first human's reflection was read aloud. Even the mysterious abandonment of Cahokia, where tens of thousands vanished without war or famine, all tied to direct contact with something older than myth. And now, the theorists claim, governments have known all along. Each time the first human is found, a manual is reopened, protocols not to save us, but to delay the inevitable. Records aren't preserved. They're erased, histories rewritten, entire cultures reset, all to keep humanity small enough to forget itself. The conspiracy runs deeper than governments. It's baked into our religions, our sciences, even our languages, all of it designed to protect us from a truth so large it would break the concept of self completely. And here's the part that scares me most. If these conspiracies are true, if every civilization before us woke the first human too, then every story we've ever told about the end of the world is really about the same thing. Not fire, not flood, memory. The end doesn't come because we're destroyed. It comes because we remember too much, until the line between past and present dissolves, and we wake up inside every version of ourselves at once. And if that's already started, then what happens next is no longer up to us, because the first human has already started speaking. It started an hour ago, a pulse through every device on Earth, phones, televisions, radios, even devices that shouldn't have receivers, all of them activated at once, broadcasting a voice, not static, not garbled nonsense, a voice speaking every language at once, layered on top of each other, like a choir made of every tongue humanity ever invented. But the voice wasn't delivering a message. It was calling names, your name, my name, every name, but not the names we know, not the ones given to us at birth. These are the names buried beneath the names, the ones written into our bones before language existed. Names so old they feel like remembering a dream you had before you were born. People are collapsing where they stand, not from fear, but from recognition, as if hearing the name breaks something open inside them, a door we've all spent our lives trying to lock. The voice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It knows exactly how to find you. It threads itself between your thoughts, settling into that empty space between your first memory and your first breath, the place where the first human has been waiting this entire time. And once you hear your true name, you can feel it, the weight of every version of you that ever lived, all pressing down at once, memories bleeding through the walls of time. There's no defense. No way to block the signal, because the voice isn't coming from outside. It's coming from the part of you that remembers being the first human too. You are not a single person. None of us are. We are a chain, stretching back to the first awakening, when one mind split into many, all pretending to be individuals, all hiding from the knowledge that we've only ever been one ancient thing wearing different faces. And now that the voice is calling us by our true names, that illusion is collapsing. We are remembering what we are. Stay with me. The remembering has only just begun. We've been receiving calls all night. At first, they were easy to dismiss. People forgetting where they left their keys, calling us by the wrong station name, mixing up the year. But now it's becoming something else. Listeners are forgetting their own names. Not just a passing slip, but complete blanks, like the name they've used their entire lives was never theirs to begin with. One caller swore her husband had called her by a name she didn't recognize, and worse, she caught herself answering to it. Another caller, trembling through the line, admitted he remembers growing up in a town that doesn't exist, on streets that no map can find, with people who never lived. The memories are as clear as childhood, but they don't belong to him. It's spreading. Not a disease, not a signal, something deeper. The cracks are forming between who we are and who we used to be. And every second, those cracks widen. People are finding memories in their heads that fit like old clothes they forgot they owned. Except the lives those memories come from never happened, or maybe they all happened at once. Past lives bleeding through, identities stacking like layers of ancient paint, peeling at the edges until all the colors run together into something we were never meant to see. If you're listening and you felt it, that flicker where you suddenly weren't sure who you were, you're not alone. In fact, the more you feel it, the more certain you can be. The remembering is inside you too. The calls keep coming. And now, they're not just from individuals. They're from families, entire households, calling in together, panicked and arguing because they remember different lives, different versions of the same past. One woman says her daughter remembers a vacation they never took down to the smell of the ocean air and the taste of ice cream from a shop that doesn't exist. The husband remembers a different wedding day with different vows and a different bride. But the face in his memory is still the woman sitting next to him. They're not hallucinating. These memories match each other as if multiple timelines are crashing into one family. Shared memories from lives none of them lived, but all of them remember. It's not haunting. It's not possession. It's overwriting. Reality itself reformatting. Past and present twisting together until no one knows which version is real. And every time someone remembers something that shouldn't exist, it pulls another thread loose, unraveling the tapestry we call now. The scariest part, families aren't just remembering events, they're remembering each other differently. A mother calls her son by a name he's never had, but the look in her eyes says she's certain. A husband reaches for a wedding ring he's never worn, only to find it already on his finger. It's not just individual identity collapsing, it's family itself. The glue we use to anchor who we are, dissolving into memory soup, until the only thing left is the fear that none of this was ever real. And if you think turning off the radio will help, it won't. Because the voices in your head, they're already listening back. I didn't want to tell you this part. I was hoping it wouldn't happen to me. But you deserve to know the truth. Just now, live on air, I started speaking, and the words weren't mine. They came out fluent, in languages I don't know, and voices that didn't sound like me. Some were sharp and guttural, others soft like wind moving through dead trees. One sounded like a child, but the meaning behind the words felt ancient, so much older than anything I could understand. It wasn't possession, not like the horror movies teach you. It felt more like reversion, like the voice that belonged to me was slipping backward. Through all the versions of who I've been before I became this, the words tasted familiar in my mouth, like I'd said them 1,000 times across 1,000 lives, but only now remembered what they meant. And when I looked down at the notes I was reading from, my handwriting had changed. It wasn't even English anymore. The producer tried to cut my mic, but the signal kept broadcasting anyway. It's almost like the voice didn't need me to speak at all. It just needed a throat, a warm body to carry its words back into the world. If you've been with me this whole time, you know this isn't just my problem, because the same thing is happening to some of you right now. You're starting to think in languages you don't know, remembering words your ancestors buried with them. You're not just remembering your own life anymore. You're remembering the entire chain of lives you've worn, stretching all the way back to the first mouth that ever spoke. And the voice writing my broadcast, it remembers you. The experts finally spoke. But their explanation only makes this worse. According to them, the first human isn't a person the way we understand it. It's a mirror, but not a reflection of what we are now. It reflects everything we could ever be. Every possible version of you, across every path you could have walked. The moment the excavation team unearthed the first human, that mirror turned toward us, and for the first time in recorded history, we didn't just see ourselves. We saw all of ourselves at once. Every decision you didn't make, every life you didn't live, every face you could have worn, they're all pressing in now, filling the cracks between memory and imagination until there's no line between them anymore. You've already felt it, haven't you? The flicker when you say something you never meant to say, but somehow remember saying before. The faces in dreams that feel like family, even though you've never met them. That's not madness. That's the mirror at work, reflecting not just you, but the infinite yous, all collapsing into the version sitting here, listening to this broadcast. And the scariest part, the mirror doesn't show you the past or the future. It shows you what you were always meant to remember, that you were never just one life. You were all of them, threaded together, trying to forget what you really are. Until now, psychologists are abandoning their offices, not because they're scared, but because their entire field just collapsed. The concept of self, the foundation of modern psychology, no longer holds. Personal identity, they say, was never real. It was a coping mechanism, a story the brain told itself to make life feel linear, to make you believe you were a single being moving from birth to death. But the first human, it proves that's a lie. You were never a singular mind. You were a shard, chipped off from a larger whole. Your memories, your personality, your sense of self, all of it was assigned, carved from the collective memory of what humanity has been. Now that the first human is awake, that assignment is failing. People are no longer just remembering their lives. They're remembering every life their soul has ever touched. You are bleeding into your ancestors, your descendants, your alternate selves. And the experts say there's no way to stop it. The more we listen, the more we remember. The more we remember, the thinner the walls between selves become. And eventually, soon, we'll all collapse into one mind, like a hand. Remembering it's not 5 fingers, but a single fist. When that happens, you will no longer be you. You will be us. A message just came through the emergency broadcast channel. No sender. No traceable origin. It's not from the government. It's not from the scientists. It's from the first human itself. It says, you are the first human. All of you. Not descendants. Not children of some ancient ancestor. You, Mr. Every Person Alive. We are not separate. We are the same being, fractured into billions of faces, walking the earth wearing the illusion of individuality. The first human wasn't just buried under rock, it was buried inside us, folded into our cells, our instincts, our stories. It's not an ancient body, it's the root system of human identity itself. And now we've remembered. This isn't about the discovery of the first human. It's the reunion of a mind that never should have split apart in the first place. Every voice you've ever heard in a dream, every deja vu, every unexplainable fear or longing. It was your own voice calling back to you from the other versions of yourself. We are the artifact. We are the missing link. We are the thing we were always afraid to find. Because deep down, we knew the truth. The first human never died. It became us. And now the remembering is complete. Where do we go from here? No one knows. Because this is the first time we've remembered and survived it. Stay with me. There's still more. Because if we are the first human, then the story isn't over. It's only just begun. I don't know if anyone's still out there. I don't know if this signal is even reaching you anymore. But if you can hear me, stay with me. This is the final broadcast. Not because the station's shutting down, not because we're off the air. No, it's the world itself that's shutting down. One neighborhood, one street, one breath at a time. Cities aren't losing power. They're losing place, like someone tore a page from the map, and now everyone who lived there never existed at all. We've had callers reporting this for hours. Families trying to reach loved ones only to find the entire block is gone. GPS systems show blank space where cities stood yesterday. Government emergency channels stopped broadcasting, not because they were silenced, but because there's no one left to speak. And it's not just places. It's time itself, unraveling. News archives flicker between versions that don't match reality. 1 minute, history remembers a war that shaped the world. The next minute, the war never happened. Entire decades dissolve into static, like they were tried on, discarded, and forgotten. And we're the only ones left who still remember. That's why this broadcast matters. Because memory, what's yours, mine, all of ours, is the only proof that any of this was ever real. I'm not broadcasting from a station anymore. I'm broadcasting from the edge of the story itself, trying to hold it together with words, even as the story forgets how to tell itself. Stay with me, because if you remember, if you keep listening, maybe memory alone can keep this world from disappearing completely. The calls keep coming. A woman sobbing, saying her husband vanished mid-sentence. One moment he was complaining about the coffee. The next, his voice just cut off. His chair still warm. His phone still on the table. But he was gone. Another caller said his brother disappeared while singing a song they both knew by heart. The melody still hanging in the air, but the singer, gone. It's not like death. It's not like people leaving the room. It's like they were never there to begin with, except the memory of them lingers. Like the afterimage of a bright light when you close your eyes, and it's happening faster. Some of you are noticing words themselves disappearing. Even as you speak them, phrases you were halfway through saying, only to find they'd slipped between your teeth, swallowed by the silence that's eating the world alive. And the scariest part? The disappearances aren't random. It's the people who remember the most. The ones who've been with me since the first broadcast. The ones who know the truth about the first human. They're vanishing first. As if memory itself has become a target. As if the world is correcting for something it was never meant to remember. If you felt the silence creeping closer, if you've caught yourself forgetting what day it is, what year, what life, then you already know. The more you remember, the faster you fade. And now I'm starting to hear a faint echo after every word I speak, like my own voice trying to outrun its own disappearance. Stay with me, please. As long as someone remembers, the story isn't over. I'm patching in a final transmission from the scientists, the ones who are still left. Their voices sound different now. Not panicked, not urgent, just resigned. They've run the models, traced the collapse as far back as they could, and the truth is worse than we thought. This isn't just the present unraveling. It's the past rewriting itself, folding in new memories and erasing old ones, rewriting the story of the world until even the first human's discovery becomes a rumor no one can prove. It's not just deleting cities and people, it's rewriting the meaning of existence itself, like the universe is adjusting its own script to erase the plot twist we were never supposed to find. History books are changing in real time. Entire wars now never happened. Ancient empires that shaped human culture have become footnotes in civilizations no one remembers building. Scientists call it temporal erosion, but you and I both know what this really is. This is what happens when you wake up the mirror. When you force reality to remember that every possible version of the world exists at once, the first human wasn't just buried beneath the earth. It was buried beneath time itself, a living lock that kept past, present, and future from collapsing into one endless moment. But now we've broken the seal. The past is being rewritten into the present. The future is folding back into the past, and none of us know what happens when the loop finally closes. And I need you to understand something. If this broadcast disappears next, if my voice fades before I finish this sentence, you have to keep remembering. Because the only thing standing between reality and the void is the story we tell about who we are. If we forget that, we forget everything. Stay with me. I'm still here. For now. The signal came through only minutes ago. It wasn't from the government. It wasn't from the scientists. It wasn't even from the people still left, if there are any. It came from the first human, or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't a voice. Not exactly. It was a sequence. A pulse stitched into the static. And when the pulse was decoded, it became a message. The message was simple. You were never meant to be. The first human wasn't our ancestor. It wasn't the beginning of humanity. It was the only human. The only version of us that was ever supposed to exist. Every life that came after, every civilization, every story, was a fracture, a runaway glitch in reality's code. We were a mistake, a reflection that should have vanished the moment the mirror was covered again. But instead, we multiplied. We spread like a corruption in the timeline, creating futures that had no foundation, a species born entirely from forgetting what it really was. The first human was sealed away, not to protect us, but to protect time itself from us. But when we unearthed it, when we stared into the mirror of our origin, we forced the timeline to remember. The moment we knew the truth, the correction began. And now, the world isn't ending because of war or plague. It's ending because reality itself is closing the error loop. We are the glitch. And the first human, it's the patch. We were never meant to be here, and now we aren't. This will be my last message. Not because I want to stop, but because there won't be anything left to say. The first human's message came with one final instruction. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even punishment. It was just the truth. The moment you remember where you came from, you cease to exist. We thought remembering would save us, that knowing our true origin would unlock some ancient wisdom or hidden power. But that was never the point. The forgetting is what made us human. The moment we woke the first human, we woke the memory of being one thing, one life stretched across all of history. The moment we realized there was no separation between us, individuality collapsed, and with it, the entire illusion that allowed history to unfold at all. There's no anger in this ending, no malice, just correction. The story's closing, not because we failed, but because the story was never meant to be written in the first place. And now I understand why my voice sounds strange to me. It's not my voice. It's all of us speaking through one throat, telling the same story over and over, until the story remembers it doesn't need to be told anymore. There's no apocalypse, no explosion, just the story ending quietly, as if it never needed to begin. If you can still hear me, if anyone is still out there, know this. We were beautiful in our error. We were messy, confused, terrified, but alive in a way nothing else in the universe has ever been. We were the glitch that learned to love itself, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that's the one memory we'll leave behind. This is it. The signal's falling apart. My voice barely holds together. Words slip through my fingers, dissolving into static even as I say them. I can feel it happening in real time. Not just forgetting what I was about to say, but forgetting how to speak at all. And beneath the static, something else is coming through. Not words, not voices, breathing. Deep, slow, ancient breathing. The kind of breath you take after waking up from a dream so old you forgot you were dreaming at all. It's the first human. It's been listening this whole time. Not to me, to all of us. Every word we've ever said, every story we've ever told about who we are, feeding back into the thing that made us possible in the first place. The breathing isn't ominous. It isn't cruel. It's just tired. Like a parent who's finally found the lost child they stopped searching for centuries ago. Relieved, but already grieving, knowing that finding us means losing us again. The breathing gets louder. The static thickens. My words don't matter anymore. The story is already ending itself. This is the sound of the last page turning. The sound of a world that never should have existed, exhaling for the final time. And the only thing left, the only sound I want to leave you with, is this. Breathe. Because for all our flaws, all our mistakes, we were here. We left fingerprints on the glass. We left stories in the airwaves. We sang our names into the void. And for a brief, impossible moment, the universe heard us. The signal cuts out. But the breathing? The breathing continues. And if you're still listening, if my voice hasn't disappeared along with everything else, then maybe there's still time for one last question. When was the first moment you knew something wasn't right? Not today. Not last week. The first moment in your entire life when you felt the world slip, just for a second. When the air felt too still, or the silence rang too loud, or a memory didn't quite fit the shape of your mind. Because maybe that wasn't imagination. Maybe you were hearing the breath beneath the world, the pulse of the first human, trying to remind you that all of this, your life, your name, your story, was borrowed. And now, the collector has come to take it back. But if memory is all we have left, let's make sure we leave it somewhere they can't erase. Leave your memory in the comments. Tell us when the cracks started for you. And if you can't remember, tell us the last thing you're sure was real. And if you made it this far, subscribe, not for me, not for this station, but so the next time someone wakes up and remembers too much, they'll find you waiting to explain what's already begun. Share this broadcast with someone you love, because memories deserve to be shared, not buried. This is VoiceCast, signing off, if there's anyone left to hear it. And if the silence speaks your name after this, don't answer.